Hello, my peeps. Today I have the pleasure of chatting with Walter Rhein, an experienced writer with 30,000 followers on Medium, a burgeoning Substack, a writer with multiple revenue streams. He's a social justice warrior, a Boost program nominator, Boost recipient, and father as well. He's a true mover and shaker on Medium and happens to be a friend of mine. So, welcome, Walter. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. That's such a nice introduction.
Not too bad. I actually didn't realize that you had 30,000 followers. I knew you had a lot, but
That's just happened in the last couple of days. Over the last couple, I don't know why, but over the last couple of months, it's really jumped. So, I have no explanation why I'm happy for it.
Cool. How long have you been on Medium?
I think I first started doing it about 2020. I had dabbled in it prior to that, but I started off with Vocal. I was doing more with Vocal.media. Just because I started kind of the two of them at the same time. I was working as a content writer at the time. I was looking for something to do to monetize, articles that were more meaningful to me. So I tried both Vocal and Medium at the same time, and based on who I earned my first, pennies from, I got pennies from Vocal quicker. So I spent about a year on Vocal, and then I kind of regret it. I think I won a contest on Vocal, but other than that, it's just, for me, didn't work out as a good revenue source. And then I switched over to Medium, and it's been a lot more effective for my style of writing.
Yeah, I've heard that quite a bit. Unless you have sort of very particular niches on Vocal, Medium does tend to be the one that people seem to get a lot more traction on.
I think if you've got ways to drive traffic to your articles, because what the advantage of Medium is they've got their internal mechanism that drives traffic to see your stories. But on Vocal, it's more, if you can get people to come based on your own mechanism, I think it works out well then. But that's just speculation. I don't really know for sure. I haven't really talked to anybody who's been extremely successful on Vocal.
Yeah, nice. So yeah, you've been on Medium somewhere around 2-3 years now, depending on when you started in 2020.
I guess it was like June of 2020 is when I think that was the first month that I started in with my 30 or so articles a month, and it's been pretty consistent since then.
Awesome. So you've grown quite quickly then, considering you've only got that much time on the platform, but you've gotten to 30,000 followers. Do you have anything that you can attribute your success to?
That's actually, it changes so much.
Great writing, of course.
Yeah. No, but it changes so much what's effective. Because initially when I started out, it was more almost an academic style papers that seemed to be successful. But I think you just really have to be mindful of, and I think it's to the credit of Medium that they're always changing things up. I mean, people are going to grumble about that, but you do also they're doing it because they want better quality writing. And I think consistently the writing has gotten better on Medium since I've been involved. So yeah, I would just tell people, back in 2020, you'd wanted to get on with the publications, the big publications. So I remember I was, I think what does the Writing Cooperative have now for followers? Like 300,000 followers or something for the publication?
250, 280, something like that. Yeah.
So I just remember just being super excited about that, the potential for that. And it doesn't translate to where you'll get an article published in a publication like that and get 250,000 views. But I remember still being so excited. It's like, oh, they accepted one of my articles finally, and like, what's going to happen? And it's like, okay, it was substantially better than the stuff I'd published on my own or in smaller publications. Didn't ever meet your wildest expectations, but nothing ever does. But then what you have to do is, you go from the publications, and that's still valid. The good publications really give a lot more visibility to your work. But then it's just, always read the emails that Medium sends out, and then always go over and read the ones that they're featuring just to get a sense of the style that they're kind of taken with at the moment, and then just try and recreate. I mean, you say what you want to say, but you try to follow the format that they're, currently enamored with, and it's good. You should always be adapting how your articles are coming out.
And what what style would you say is the one that they're currently enamored with?
It's definitely that the personal narrative, the stuff that you're an expert on, the stuff that you have a right or a background or some sort of an experience to have a meaningful and valuable opinion on. And the most important thing I think with the stuff that they're promoting now is you have to have something at the end of your story that is kind of that aha moment. You got to convey something new to the reader. They have to give them so they leave thinking that they got something of value from the article.
Time well spent.
Yeah, it's kind of a complex mix now, but I mean, I'm enjoying that you're allowed for a little bit more of narrative freedom now, so it feels a little bit more like you're writing, you're combining kind of creative writing with sort of an opinion article and trying to convey an important message. So it's kind of a neat mix.
Yeah. And I know that your sort of chosen niches on Medium are you've got sort of quite a bit on social justice, but then you've also got a column with the Writing Cooperative. Is that once a week?
Yep, once a week.
Once a week. How did that come about with the Writing Cooperative to have that column?
Oh, I forgot to go and look it up. The writing, they had another editor who worked along with Justin. I think Justin has taken it all on. There in the past, there had been, I think, 2 other editors that occasionally would evaluate your work, and I think they just had a spot open up. I'd been contributing them pretty regularly, and it just caught the eye of the other editor. So I'd been working with her with this column, and it's just that's kind of changed over time too. It used to be kind of they had a preferred portal, but it was just like a Google Sheets you could submit your story to. So it was just kind of separate from the regular submissions, but that's gone away now. Now you're just in with the regular submissions. But it's been a good thing. It's been just an opportunity. It was just from having submitted to them for a long time. The slot opened up and they offered it to me and I took it, and it's been a productive pairing for me since then.
Awesome.
I hope for them too.
So it was essentially just having a good long-term rapport with the editorial team there that got you the spot, and then the right timing came along. Perfect. So with that column, you talk about obviously writing advice because it's the Writing Cooperative. What would you say is sort of your top advice for either somebody new to the platform or might have been around a while but wants to really increase their footprint?
I think it's important to get to know the editors of various publications. And it's just important. It always is reading. You spend more time reading than, because a lot of times, Justin will do a newsletter and there'll be things in his newsletter. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting idea. And it's like, if I can write a response to some sort of, thing he's wrestling with that turns into my own article, that's going to be of interest to him. Now I know what's on his mind and what kind of things he's likely to want to see in his publication. So it's just kind of that interconnectedness of being aware of these, the better you are at forming your personal relationships with the editors, that always helps with, getting your work placed in a place where it's visible. And that goes back to, I wrote for a local, regional magazine for many years. And it's just so much easier to sell your articles if this was back in the days of, mailing in an article and waiting 2 months for them to take it or not. So this is, once you get to know an editor and they're just like, oh, this guy's reliably good. Well, yeah, absolutely. But this is just when you get an editor who's like, oh, this guy's got consistently good material that just makes my life easier. Then you're sending things in, it's going to get, so it's more likely to be sold. But you're, just as a writer, go in it with this perspective of, you can't have a contentious relationship with the editors. Your job is to make the life. And you should work as an editor. I've done that before too. I edited a major publication in South America when I lived there. And when writers sent me their well-formatted work and they had great pictures and stuff, it was just, oh, okay, I'm consistently, this guy's reliable. That makes my life easier. And that stuff's going to make it into the magazine. Good
advice. Yeah, I'm I'm an editor too, and sometimes people can be really difficult and hard on editors. And I think number one, maybe people forget that on Medium, editors are volunteers, um, and they're volunteers who are volunteering their time to help you. So making that relationship work is just, in my opinion, the right thing to do. But you're also going to get a lot more, as you pointed out, from having good relationships with people. And because Medium's a big place, but kind of a small place at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, it always stings. I mean, when I get, anything that I later on can accept as good advice always stings when you first hear it, So you just have to just adopt a professional attitude with the emails you get. And then, I try to remember that when I'm putting on my editor hat, because I'll work with some writers and it's like, well, this is a good article, but, we have to do some massive cuts and we have to do this and that. And it's like, sometimes you're talking to people, it doesn't all come through too, because I try to tell people, I'm like, this is good work, but you should write another article with this whole paragraph in another article. It's like, I have to cut it, not because it's bad. You try to explain that, and it's like, it's like, this article's at 13 minutes. I think that's going to hurt your read rate. You're going to lose engagement of your readers if it's that long. Let's get it down to 6 minutes and be more focused on this one key point. But all that stuff, there's just potential for that to hurt feelings when you're trying to convey that, especially if you're terse in your communication. And I mean, I prefer to write over email, where I'm not limited in the number of characters I can use to talk to a writer, just because it just makes it easier to be courteous. You just say the nice thing, and just always take the time to say the nice things that the writers have to hear it, and it's just try to explain why you are suggesting the cuts you're making or whatever. But it's hard. It's a hard game. Emotions are always at play with writing.
yeah, yeah. So you've got your publication that you run, Write and Review.
Mm-hmm.
Of all the topics you could have gone with, book reviews probably doesn't get the biggest amount of reads on the platform. Is that a labor of love, or why did you do that?
It's funny. I did my Medium Day presentation on that because it makes me no money. It takes all my time, and it's just nobody appreciates it, and I can't even get I always laugh about it because I'll review a book of an author and they won't even share it on social media. They the review, it's like. But it's just the state of things, because it's funny because I looked it up not too long ago, and that was the very first thing I put on Medium, was to do this review platform. And it's just, you just have to take a step back, and it's the benefits for doing something like that are akin to just the benefits of kindness. You're never going to get money for being nice, but in the long term, your life is elevated from being nice. So it's like the very first thing I did when I got on Medium was I made this review publication. And right now there's so many obstacles for people to have any kind of a narrative out there, right? Everything is controlled. I mean, you look at billionaires buying social media platforms so they can control what stories are shared, right? So that's really what you're facing. And just this whole where even people who think of themselves as book lovers refuse to pick up a book that's independently published. I mean, there's just these, what I find are consistently great are just the stories that people, when people just sit down and tell their life story, like the story that needs to be told, those books are always interesting. And it's, it's the gossip of a person's whole life. I mean, people publish these things all the time. And I just think it's important, I hope it carries on. I wish, if bigger name writers would always pick just 2 independent books, or, books from authors nobody's ever heard about, pick 2 of them and review them every month. Oh, that's just a windfall to somebody, who might never have their work seen otherwise. So I just think that's important. And it's something I expect to continue to do, a couple small press, independently published book reviews per month.
Yeah. So you've got a book of your own.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember.
The Berkey one, it's called Beyond Berkey Fever, about the American Burka binder. Nobody knows how to pronounce it, so.
Yes, I was having a hard time thinking about that. How did that come about? Just out of curiosity.
I was telling you the story before about contributing to the regional magazine. So the first place where I managed to place an article that actually got me paid was with Silent Sports magazine, and it just that it Silent Sports are articles about bicycling and cross country skiing and running, and it serves Wisconsin and Michigan and Minnesota. And I got $100 or something for an article. So for a while, I was writing articles to them, and I had like 15 of these articles. And at that point, I'm like, oh, these kind of fit together. And I had about a third of a book at that point, so I figured out I ended up having to rewrite them all, but I came up with a book from that, and I'd found I'd had a small or an independent publisher. This was about 2010 that took the manuscript, and it's one of those things where the ski racing, it's America's largest cross country ski race, so there's I think the annual number of people in all the events up there is around 10,000 people who do this event. It's just this major event, and so it's a relatively small group, but they're extremely dedicated. So I'm like, if there's like the potential exists to sell a copy to just about all these people. So the book has done pretty well, over the years. And I have a couple other books, but the one about the Berkey is the one that's been by far the most popular. And it's just neat to write it's kind of a, what do we call it? Biographical fiction type of book where it's more like, fisherman stories. You talk about things that have a basis in reality, but you make it a little bit more entertaining. So it's not necessarily fact by fact, but it's a book that some people have come up to me and said that they read that book on the eve of the ski race every year. And that's another thing. It's this major event in our area, so it's always in the news. So I always get sales from that time of the year.
Annually, yeah.
So it's been a good project, and I'm, if nothing else of mine lingers, I'd be perfectly content for that to be the one.
Awesome. And how was your experience using a publisher? Is there any you said you use a small publisher. I'm not sure if you've self-published any other books.
Yeah, well, that one actually, the publisher ceased operations. They reverted the rights to us. So then I went from the publisher, which was really nice in hindsight, and I was able to. Then I just put it on through CreateSpace, and I saved all the reviews that had been gathered up from when they were working. They didn't have to do that. That was really generous on their part. Not all publishers are like that. So I've worked with, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 small presses at this point. And they've all been different with good and bad things. They almost never have much of a marketing budget. So I'm content, if I get a cover and a round of editing and then just being able to go to local libraries and say it's published with a small press, that tends to help. I mean, the situation where they give you all that and then they revert the rights to you, so then you can put it on CreateSpace. I don't know. I always wonder why people, like, why does Stephen King go through a publisher? It doesn't make sense to me. Why not just do the print? He's big enough where he doesn't need the marketing. He probably doesn't have to edit. He could probably write the name of the title on a cardboard box and take a picture of it, and that would be a good enough cover. So why is he limiting his profits by going through a public? I don't understand why that is. Although maybe they have such a rigid hold on distribution that he wouldn't be able to, even somebody like him wouldn't be able to sell if he didn't go through the mechanism. I don't know. That's all speculation, but that's why I review books.
Yeah. or maybe they just make his life easier by going through them, and he doesn't have to deal with all that.
I know, but I mean, how hard would it be to hire somebody who's clever at CreateSpace? Well, you wouldn't do CreateSpace if you. What nobody ever talks about is just doing their own print run. The unit cost on your or publish on demand stuff, it makes it so every unit costs so much you can't really make a profit. But I've worked before where I've promoted. I helped found a running marathon, so we did a flyer, and it's just amazingly cheap when the more units you print up, the cheaper each unit cost is. So, I mean, if you've got this built-in audience and you're going to sell 10,000 copies, if you do the reverse print run of 10,000, you'll make good money on it. So I don't know. A lot of this is stuff that nobody ever talks about. I never understand why nobody does.
Yeah. Actually, I've got a 2-part question about this. For people who are looking to publish a book, so either they're planning to write one or have written one and want to publish it, do you have any sort of advice for somebody looking to break into that world? And then two, if somebody has published a book but found that they haven't sold many copies, is there anything you'd recommend for them to do?
Well, the second one is you're just like every other writer then. It's like don't lose hope is the first thing. You're just not going to sell any copies. It just doesn't work. I think probably the best advice to people who have a book is to just contact your local libraries, because the local librarian here, he always, they give you a speaking fee. You go and present. So I've made probably more on my speaking fees at libraries. I think that's just an undervalued resource. I think anybody who has a book can likely go to your local libraries and then have that librarian talk to other libraries that are nearby, and they'll figure out a way to, if you can do 10 of those, they give you 100, $200 or whatever, you're making pretty good money on your presentation. So I do that first I think that's the best way. I wouldn't, what was the one I used once? BookBub actually did work, but most of the marketing stuff just is just a waste of money, I think. I think Medium getting started at Medium and generating a following there, but I can't really say that my following on Medium has led to sales of my book. There's been a couple of readers have mentioned, and then it's a way to get my attention. If you want, it's like if you review my book and you tag me in the review, I'm going to share that. I do the things that I criticize other readers for not doing. As far as breaking into like the world of writing books, it's a frustrating business. I think who was it? Persistence. That's the thing to remember in the publishing industry. It's not likely to make any money, but I mean, as long as you know all that stuff and you're aware of it going into it, do your research. Don't get don't get suckered into the deal where somebody ends up presenting a really expensive deal as if it's a traditional publishing contract, and then the next thing you know, you're paying $10,000 for a book cover and all this. That watch out for the scam is the big one. If you get a legitimate deal from a small press that does the editing and does the cover, and then they give you what should you be getting on back end? I think you should compare it to your Create Space. I think the options on Create Space are you getting like 70%, and then of each of the profit after the unit cost. Just go through the contract. I think a lot of these smaller presses will be, I don't even know what it is anymore. Look what they're giving you in terms of royalties, particularly if they're not giving you any kind of an advance, and just do some research as to whether the number seems reasonable. I'll have to just double check. I don't have them off the top of my head.
Perfect. That's great advice for people to start off with. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, don't be writing checks. The thing to remember is the money flows to the writer. If it goes the other way, get away. That's a bad place.
Well, a lot of writers do a lot of things without making a lot of money. So,
yeah.
Which actually leads me to my next question. I know that you have multiple income streams for your writing. Could you share a little bit about your approach and how that's gone for you?
Yeah, that's just been going on for years and years. There's they always come and go. What I find in revenue streams are just going to evaporate in writing. It just always happens. I mean, the one editor with Silent Sports, he moved on, so then the next editor didn't like my work. So it's like, okay, that consistent payment every week or every month is gone. I do product reviews, so that's one of the ways that. And I'm in a situation where, like Jason with the BBB blog, his wife has got the stable job. My wife's got a stable job here, so we can rely on health insurance and stuff through her. So then I'm just out hustling for money, and that just makes my life a lot easier. And yeah, but it's like,
so you're just out whoring out your words.
Yep, pretty much. That's pretty much it. Hustling for money, but it's like the product review stuff helped because I can get winter jackets for the girls and things like that. So that's an expense we don't have, and I'm appreciated for that. So just got to make my contribute to the household. But I'm always on the lookout for new ones too. And I think that's a critical thing. Even if things are going really well, you just have to dabble in some other platforms. And I'm always, I'll occasionally just write a article and submit it somewhere, and it's useful, and that helps for Medium too. And that's what makes Medium really great, is that In the past, you'd write your article, you'd submit it, you have to wait 3 months for it to come back, then you'd submit it somewhere else, and then eventually you'd probably forget about it in your emails. So now often I'll write something for some other journal, and then if they don't take it, then I'm like, okay, when it comes back, I can put it on Medium and get something from it. So Medium in some ways is like your slush pile, the way to get some profit from the stuff that didn't sell elsewhere. And it just makes the whole writing process easier when you know you have a place to get some benefit from the work you put in.
Yeah. And where do you look for writing gigs when you are looking for them?
I have to go get those web pages again. There's a couple. What is it? Duotrope. Duotrope. I think had it. Submittable. Do you know Submittable?
I don't know that one.
There's a web page. I think it's called Submittable. Yeah, and you can just go through there and search. So a lot of times you'll just go on there and search, or you can just do random searches for journals that might be related. But I think Submittable is probably the best one, where you jump on there and then it keeps track of where things are submitted and whether it's accepted or not. So it's got this huge. You have to go and click off though, because some of them, they have an option in there where it says some of them have a reading fee, so don't pay the reading fee. If you submit an article and they want you to pay $5 for them to read it, no, that doesn't get a submission. And there's a bunch more though. I had two more links that I found.
Yeah, well, I'd probably say that generally don't pay to write, with the hopes that they're going to pay you. If they're asking for money, they don't.
That's the number one rule. That's worth making an article about. I anticipated that in our talk I'd have some ideas to write articles about. So
perfect.
We can both do that one. I think that one needs to be emphasized.
Yeah, let's get the word out about that. Honestly, I feel bad because, well, much like everything else, the writing world is not impenetrable to scammers, and I have seen writers be taken advantage of. I don't want to say often, but enough to be on the lookout for it and be concerned about it.
Well, even the articles of how to make $1,000 a month writing are kind of scams. A lot of times you read, it's like they're not making that much money, so it's like that's probably not true.
Yeah, probably about 98% of the ones on Medium, I'd say, are not great advice.
And Medium's done a good job where that's really not as prevalent as it was. Back when I started, those are really disappearing. So that's a testament to Medium.
Yeah, I do really like that has sort of gone away in the feeds as well.
I think the stuff though, and what I do in my Substack, I think I do like writing the articles on how to succeed on Medium, and I see the value in Medium not wanting you necessarily to put that on Medium, but it makes sense to me. And it's like, okay, if you're going to write a how to succeed on Medium, you should put it on a different platform so it drives people over to Medium. That seems pretty logical.
Yeah. So I've been following your Substack for a while now. For anybody watching, definitely check out Walter's Substack. He's got some great tips for writing on Medium, writing in general, and also tips on how to increase your odds of being selected for the Boost program, because he is a Boost nominator. It's not sort of well known in circles that you're a Boost nominator, but you do have it on your Substack.
Yeah.
So I really do recommend checking it out. I'll get to some Boost nomination stuff in a minute. But first I wanted to hear sort of how your Substack is going. How long have you been running it, and how is that going for you?
Gosh, how long even is that? I'm kind of finding my way with that yet. I just kind of started it. My friend Allison Atchison, who I also knew from Medium. There's a couple of writers that I met just in my first few months in Medium. And they're both named Allison. Allison Wiltz and Allison Atchison are the two of them. And I hope I'm pronouncing Wiltz correctly. She's the editor of Cultured, and she does really good social justice articles. It's one of the things, right? You learn so much and gives you so many directions of things to check out from Allison Wiltz's articles. But Allison Atchison kind of gravitated to Substack. It's just different platforms attract people, and it's just the way it works. Where she just liked that newsletter format, and hers did really well. She's got what's called the Unschool, where she kind of teaches. She retired from her job as a writing professor, and so her her Substack is like the unschool, how to be everything that you need to be that you'd get from a master's class in writing, but for free, not a school, based on her years teaching. So I mean, and she's had good success with that, and she kind of kept saying, "Well, you should be on this," and I'm like, "Well, I should explore Substack, just because it's good to have, like we said before, you always have to have your eye out for potential other revenue streams." So I've just been kind of dabbling with it and seeing what kind of sticks. I'm still kind of in that exploratory phase. I've been doing just an article a week, and so your feedback is really helpful just to kind of see what people want to read. But I'm amazingly just using it for. I think I'm gonna. Yeah, I like to assess what happened in my week. Just kind of talk to people about how to succeed in Medium, and then just kind of go from there on the feedback I get from readers. But it's I don't really have much of a plan for it. We'll see how it keeps going, or if it explodes, or if it just stays as it is. It's been sitting at 60. I think only 60 subscribers for a while, which is it's worth it to keep going. But we'll see what happens.
Well, I really enjoy it because I found this with yours, and I found this on pretty much all of the Substacks that I really like the most, is that there's kind of like a behind the scenes, personal, chill kind of vibe. It's a lot less formal than you read on Medium or when you read your work elsewhere, and it's just sort of almost like you're just sort of sitting there chatting with a friend, and they're just kind of telling you about what's going on in their life, and talking about how you can do things certain ways, and what's working for them. And I really like that vibe. Was that intentional, or it just happened?
I think it's kind of coming just because that's what I found in the other Substacks. So it's and all these platforms are their community unto themselves. You have to kind of know the rules of the community, so you have to know what the kind of writing works on Medium. But I come from blogging. I have a background in blogging too, so the blogging was just sitting down and kind of more like free writing type writing. And what I'm doing with Medium now, it's changed a lot over the last couple of years. But I've noticed over the last couple of weeks that in the past I used to write my article and publish it all in the course of a couple hours. Now I am spending, with the trying for a boost, I am spending more time on every article, and it's more common that I'll get it done and sit on it for a couple of days before I submit it. I didn't used to do that 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm doing a lot more where I'm sending it out to other writers to get their feedback on my work. So Substack is just a place where sometimes you do just have to get the instant feedback. You just crank something out and get it out there and have it be less formal, like you said. And there's benefit to that. You can get a nice little following. So it's a nice vibe. It's nice to kind of go back to your roots in Substack.
Yeah, nice. And I love that you said that you still send your work to other friends and writers to see what they think. Because you've been a writer for how long, apart from Medium?
Yeah,
it was back in the days of pigeons and phones, but
I think my first article got accepted I was 20 something, so 22 or 23. So it's been 20 some years I've been sending articles out and sketching and scribbling in notebooks. So it's been a long time.
Yeah. So I love that you're still doing that, because I think a lot of people that are
you hearing barking, or is that in my yard? Well, go ahead. I think there's a dog outside.
I was gonna say mine are perfectly quiet, thankfully.
Yeah. My dog went to go check it out, so it's over here. Okay, sorry about that interruption.
Yeah, no worries. So I think a lot of new writers think once you've been writing for a little bit, like, you're good, and then you're just you're done learning, you're good at it, and you just keep being good at it. But I haven't found that that's the experience for me. Like I just sent an article that I wrote, I think it was 2 days ago, to a couple of friends before I published it. That was my I'd fuck Hitler's dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, and I sent it to a couple of friends, like, what do you think? Is this crazy? Should I publish this? Because I think even over time you can still doubt yourself and question yourself and need feedback from others.
There's a lot of
doubt yourself.
I don't know if that's the right word, but there's that first phase of editing where just like just within yourself, you write something, you get a sense that a sentence isn't quite right, and sometimes I'll leave that for now and come back to it. So just getting all that out of there is an issue. When it comes to stuff like the social justice stuff I write, I like to send it to somebody like Allison just to make sure I'm not, because I'm writing. I mean, the social justice stuff started because my wife is an immigrant from Peru, and just it's been immigration, like hostility against immigrants, has been such a big political issue in the United States for the last 10 years now. And so, and it's just embarrassing. Where like some of these, it's easy to be a person of privilege and just not be aware that this stuff happens. And so it's just embarrassing when it's like, okay, but I still only am getting a reflection of that. And I think we have an obligation, if you're trying to work on social justice issues, to understand, but you also have to have an awareness that it's an indirect experience. So I like to Johnny Silvercloud's another good one. And he actually, at one point, he had me as an editor of his publication, and it just made me uncomfortable. I told him, I said, his was a little different. I'm just like, I need for you to look at my work first, just to make sure I'm not putting my foot in my mouth, and I'm getting the terms right, and correct me on these things. And I think sometimes because I think there's people that they say, well, we appreciate what you're doing. We're willing to let some of the little stuff go. And it's like, I need you to tell me so I have this more complete understanding, because it's not a direct experience for me. So there's that aspect. But then there's just the other side of, there's the aspect of getting the facts right. You need that editing should always be there. And then the aspect of explaining yourself clearly, whether there's better word choices. And there have been times when I've gone through, and a lot of times you accept, editing, that's a whole hour to talk about editing right there, because I've had editors that for books where I got into a battle once, actually on the Berkey book. I got in a little bit of a battle with the editor for that one over, let's not get into it too much, but I got into the battle just over the use of a word. And then another editor, when I was working with Janet Morris at Perseed Press, and I was concerned that I was being too hostile or combative. I'm like, are you getting this sense from me? And she sat me down. She was just like, no, ultimately it's your name on the title. So on the title page, the problem is that everybody's read On Writing by Stephen King, and he specifically says in there, you can never fight with your editors. But Stephen King was writing from the perspective of somebody who's working with these major publishers with the renowned editors, as opposed to the rest of us who are working. I mean, today we're working with small presses, and so I think there's a little bit, you still have to be courteous and you have to have a professional relationship, but the relationship is different now than what people presume it is. But then because everybody's read On Writing, they're gonna lecture you if you say anything that's contrary to that, even though it's in the past. So yeah, I don't know. I'm getting out in the weeds.
Oh yeah, no. I've heard quite a bit of comments about that part from On Writing, and Stephen King certainly is a famous author and a phenomenal author, but he is only one author.
Well, I think ultimately it's not about doubting yourself. You want to make the piece better. You can always make the piece better, right? It can always be better. So just getting another opinion to potentially, even if it's just a minor change, just to make it a little bit better, it can make a huge difference. So
yeah. Oh no, I definitely agree. All right, so let's switch gears to your role in the Boost nomination program. I know I've read about it on your Substack. So again, if anybody's really curious about this, he's got some really tangible information in his Substack. And I really like that you've taken an approach that people can actually use and apply, especially about studying the other articles that are getting boosted or getting, selected by Medium as some of their top reads, and really studying sort of what they're doing. In terms of being in the Boost nomination program, first of all, how has that been going? How have you found?
It's really good. I've settled into a pretty good routine now. I was going to say something I thought about for this interview is the tags are really important that people put on their stories in Medium, because mainly I find mine by just going to the racism archive on Medium. You go to that page and I just see whatever's been written, and I'm generally looking, stuff that's, I'll scroll through them pretty fast. I mean, if something's under 6 minutes long, I generally won't even read it for consideration for boost, just because I don't feel you can. It's not going to be what they're looking for, and it's a little bit of guesswork. Because ultimately, I mean, I only get to nominate. I don't get to determine whether it's, But my job is I take it. I put I take the submission. I put it on the desk, and so it helps to get another set of eyeballs on your work. So whether it's taken or not, that could ultimately be helpful. The more people the more time people see your name, the better it is going to be for you. And a couple of the ones I've nominated, I've seen then get recommended and be on that little part in the corner of Medium where they show their featured stuff. So that's happened. Those get big views. So that's potentially good for people. But yeah, I mean, mainly, if you I check it just about every day. I go onto the racism archive. So if you want me to look at a work, something you've written, if you just have that racism tag, chances are I'm going to see it.
Fantastic. And is that racism and that element of social justice, is that everything you nominate or the bulk of what you nominate?
That's the bulk. I'm not sure if I think it was a diversity category, but I've nominated, if I find a good story in just about any topic, I've had success nominating them. They've been approved. So I don't fully understand entirely what's required of me, but I've been pretty successful in the things that I've been sending in for approval. So, but I mean, you're looking for you got to make sure it's like you got to cite your featured image, that's instant disqualification, and make sure you got a good title. I'll leave notes with some people sometimes. It's just like, if you just have, enough is my title. It's like, no, that you need to give us more and there's that, it's useful to spend some time with that title tool. What's it called? CoSchedule, I think. There's a headline analyzer. Do a search for that. I don't know if you've played around with that or not, where you type your title in there and then it gives you a numerical rating and it tells you it's a little bit silly, but you get a better sense of what titles perform, and you try to get a rating above 70 on this tool. So that helps.
Yeah, but I used to use those quite a bit. But I think I used it so long that eventually I got to the point where I'm like, all right, I'm pretty good at this, and I just
that's what you need to do.
Weird with my headlines.
Yeah, I mean, what was the highest number you ever got? Did you ever get anything in the 90s, like a 90 rated headline?
I don't remember. I haven't used that one in particular.
Okay, yeah.
I've used different ones, so that there were always different scales.
Yeah, okay, that would be.
But I found that the more that I used it, also, and then the more that I experimented, that some titles that I put into there that would get a bad rating, and I'm like, you know what? I don't care. I like it.
Yeah.
I'm going with it anyway, and they work super well. So I think there is also a fine line between.
Yeah, there's a difference between
and taking their advice, and then also going with your gut and experimenting. But you do have to learn the rules of it first.
You have to know your readers too, and what your readers are more likely to respond to. So that makes a big deal, particularly as you develop a bigger following on a platform like Medium. Yeah, that makes a big difference.
But you're definitely right about titles that are like enough.
Yeah.
Enough what?
No, so so when I'm scrolling through the archive, I'm looking for something 6 minutes, but then it can be to any length. So it usually my minimum is about 6 minutes. And then I'm just looking for a good solid title. And then, but then as you're scrolling through it, the things that throw you off are just like the failure to properly cite things. And, there's a lot of things that are just kind of instant disqualifications. So a lot of times it's like, if I find something nominated, it's just something that I didn't have a reason to disqualify, which is, I mean, another just fundamental rule of writing is always read the submission guidelines to places. I mean, and I would always direct people to the Writing Cooperative, because I think they've got a really clear set of, and it took me a long time, submitting to them before they took anything of mine. And they would always give you like the rejection. It'd just be like failure to comply with the guidelines. And then they tell you which one it was. They had like 4 or 5 points. I don't know if they still do it that way or not.
I don't
But
think so.
okay.
I think now they just don't tell you anymore. You just don't hear back.
Yeah, so that was more useful back. I was lucky to get in there. They'd say which one it was. But yeah, just getting like the right header size and the headers you're using and doing the right type of quotes. Just getting all that stuff right is really important.
Absolutely. I'm trying to think. I've got a question unrelated to Medium or any of that. What would you say is the most surprising thing you found being a writer?
The minute what comes to mind is like just the extra benefits. I had a unique experience where when I was working with the editor for the publication in Peru. At that time, Peru had its first Winter Olympian who was a cross country skier. I was living in Peru at the time. This gets back to my novel about the American Birkebeiner. So I saw that Peru was going to have its first Winter Olympian. He was a cross country skier, and it occurred to me, I'm like, well, I'm the only person in this country who even knows what that is. So I wrote the guy, and I'm just like, hey, and so then I did this article about him, and it got into our little publication. But then Peru's major newspaper would always kind of pick through our stuff for good stories. So they found the story about him from us, and then he got a front page in the biggest newspaper in Peru. So this guy he was really grateful to me. So he's like, oh, I'm going to do, and what he did for training was he did this Inca Trail hike, which was normally like this $5,000 trip. He's like, well, why don't you come along as a journalist and cover this? So I went and did the Inca Trail hike with him and this other Olympian from the Czech Republic named Martin Kukal. So yeah, and it was just sort of like, so as a writer, this is what happens to you. You know, you're never getting paid, but then you end up, it's like, okay, here I am on this trip that normally only rich people get to do, and I'm here. So it's just a way to kind of sneakily kind of get in to have the life that privileged people have, but you're kind of going in through the back door and avoiding, paying for it because writers don't have any money.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is crazy some of the people you can meet and experiences you can have that you otherwise wouldn't as a writer. I remember I was working for a newspaper back when those were a thing. For the younger generation, that's these things they printed out on shitty paper and they sent it to your house every day, and that's how you got your news. And I got to interview a woman who she became sort of famous during the Vietnam War. She had an image taken of her as a child, and it became really iconic. It was her thin and naked running down a road after a fire, and it was after a napalm explosion.
Okay.
And this ended up becoming one of the most iconic images from the war in Vietnam. And I got to interview her, which was incredible, and just hearing her experience and all of that, because long after that she came to Canada as an immigrant and settled in here. And yeah, I never would have gotten that without.
Yeah, it's all those stories are remarkable, and whether it's the people that are famous or just regular people getting these stories, yeah, that's really there's memorable things that happen.
Yeah. And so you were mentioning writing that
Birkebeiner, yeah. Canada's got a Birkebeiner too, I think. The Canadian Birkebeiner.
Birkebeiner. I'll know how to say that by the end of it. So you wrote that article about the skier in Peru. Was that in English or Spanish?
It was English. I was working for a webpage. It was a portal. They've changed their names a bunch of times. I don't even know what they called themselves now. It was living in Peru at the time. So it was the English speakers portal to Peru was the idea. So yeah. I was writing in English.
Nice. And how long were you living in Peru?
That was about 10 years, from 2001 to 2009. Yeah.
And what brought you to Peru?
escape. I just had left. I was just fed up with the United States, and I actually I was thinking of getting a master's degree. So I'm like, well, I'm not gonna. But I was tired of being in classrooms, so I'm like, I'll just go learn Spanish in South America, and it was so inexpensive to live. I'm just like, I'm just gonna keep staying here. Where it's like my rent for my apartment was like $100 a month, and it's just like, okay,
Wow.
yeah.
So after 10 years, how's your Spanish?
Good. My wife and I still speak Spanish in the house, and
Oh,
that was, yeah, and that was one of the things in 2000. When was it? 2016. I just wrote an article. It was a letter to the editor I wrote for the local paper here about that, because we were just having instances. It was based on the Trump campaign. We're having just more and more instances of people coming up and screaming at us for speaking Spanish in our community. And like the point of it was never me. They'd come and yell at my kids, or they'd come and yell at my wife, but they didn't come and tell me not to speak Spanish. I wrote this just a letter to the editor, and it ended up being the most read article in that paper. I think it's been eclipsed since then, but at the time it was the most read article for the local paper. But just the way you wonder why newspapers are going out of business. I sent them a follow-up article to that.
Why that?
Well, I sent them a follow-up article, and they wouldn't publish that. They're like, well, we only publish from the same person once a month. And I'm just like, you just wrote an article about how this was the most read article ever. It's like, how is that not? So,
Yeah.
or but maybe it was the content that they didn't like, so that could have been it too.
Yeah. And how long have you been back stateside now?
We moved back in 2009.
Okay, so quite a while.
Yeah.
And why did you come back? Or why did you go back to the United States after 10 years? And
yeah, it's been
for $100 a month.
Yeah. Well, at the time I was on the verge of an election down there. So there was this one candidate that was getting a lot of he was making us nervous, the one candidate. And I thought, well, it's like, my wife at the time only had her Peruvian passport, and then just like, it's like, that kind of limits some of the places we're able to go. So it's like, let's go ahead and get you your US citizenship just to give us like this flexibility. A US passport is a ticket to the world. And then so it was a combination of those two things. But then it's sort of like, oh, okay, you end up getting settled in so much. So we're here pretty much until the kids. Plus, Peru's got good university education, but the high school, it's a little bit tougher. They do have good ones, but it gets really expensive to go to their private schools. So I'm like, well, it seemed like the best way to do it was to go into the U.S. public schools. Seemed like the best option. Of course, here, 15 years later, you always second guess everything you did. So who knows? Maybe this is the choice. This is the path we're on, so we got to make the best of it.
Yeah, yeah. I've had a similar experience. I lived in Mexico for 10 years. And the same type of thing happens there. Like, they do have some, absolutely phenomenal, top-notch schools, but it's going to cost you. And they do have, top-notch, world-rated, healthcare.
Yeah.
You can get, but that's going to cost you as well.
The healthcare was a lot cheaper in Peru than it was here. I had an asthma medication at the time that it was just nothing down there, and here it was like $400 a month. So it was sort of like, I just quit taking it.
Yeah. Well, for me, healthcare is
that's different.
free up here.
But... Oh yeah, you've got a different perspective than I do. You've got a rational perspective on healthcare. Here, they're gonna get every penny. They're gonna keep you alive until they got every penny they have, and then they just throw you out on the street. So that's the way it goes in America.
Yeah, that's funny. It's funny because the U.S. and Canada, I think, are two of the most similar countries, and yet so different in certain ways, like healthcare. Yeah. Also, I think immigration, we do things quite differently and have a different attitude towards it as well.
Things here change so quickly. It's the only thing that gives me hope is how quickly, like the right to same-sex marriage, once that generated momentum, it's just, it seemed like it took forever, and then it's like once it really hit kind of a critical mass, it was just instantly pushed through, and it's sort of like, okay, things can. It sounds funny though. It takes forever, but then when that critical mass happens, the change can be quick too. So that's what keeps you hopeful. I don't know. The insanity in the United States right now is just unprecedented. I can't recall anything like it, especially with the attempt to overthrow the government in 2000. I mean, that's just in 21. And the fact that you're not allowed to talk about it yet, it's creepy. In community areas, I came to the public school, they invited me to their community talk about the direction of the school district, and it was just ominous. You really felt the things you were allowed to say. It's like, don't get political as instantly. It's like, well, are we allowed to say that Biden won the election, or is that too political? You're asking questions like that, which is bizarre because there's such a population of fanatic people in this country who still insist that Trump won. Just because, and then the media doesn't help because they keep giving a platform to all these people that say these things. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll see what happens.
I read an article of yours where you were at a school council meeting, and I think you were almost kicked out, and you were not very popular there.
It was more, not that it's specifically kicked out, but it's just that I was making yeah, you just felt it. You walked in there and it's just, well, I was telling them because there's been this, and they always disguise what they want, and the thing they're saying, well, they were saying we need this parental bill of rights. Well, that sounds reasonable. It's like, okay, yeah, parents should be involved. But then it turns out it's like, well, parents, if you have a student who's transgender who feels enough trust with with the school to be transgender, even though his family isn't open to that, which is a heartbreaking problem. Well, these parents are getting really angry. So it's like if he wants to go by a girl's name at school, they have this parental bill of rights so that teachers aren't allowed to do that without telling the parents. Well, then the kid might go home and get kicked out of his house. So these are the kind of things that are going on, and they're just disguised. So I just got up and like, well, we need a. That wasn't when I said that. I said I want to protect the teachers' bill of rights, and then later on I thought, well, we also need a student's bill of rights. So if there are people are like, well, because it's easy to have a big community meeting and say things like, we're parents and parents look out for the rights of the kids. If you turn around and say, well, not all parents do. I mean, there's really abusive parents out there, so we have to look out for the rights of the students. That's when you suck the air out of the room, and I'm good at getting the air sucked out of the room. The things I say. So it's better for me. I find it is. I think it's safer for me to do these things from online where there's no physical threat to my safety, which is a concern, really.
That's crazy. That's crazy. I know that the rest of the world just watches the States, with like it's a movie with 3D glasses and popcorn. Like, what are these crazy bastards doing now?
Well,
it's a big reality show almost sometimes, but
I get it.
I forget that it's real people.
Well, the amount of the nuclear arsenal is a thing that should be of concern to people, and I tell the people. Sometimes I get through to people, and it's like that the $1 trillion, what is it, $800 billion military budget, depending on who does the calculation. But then, everybody knows the U.S. military is the most expensive in the world, but few people know that the U.S. police force would be the third most well-funded. I think it was only China. I think had more well-funded. It's sort of like we're living in a police state here. It's like we talk. This gets through to people because you get all these people talk about freedom and all this, and it's like you understand. We've basically got an occupying military force in the country that's bigger than like the Russian army, which is like fifth or sixth or something in the world. And sometimes you can get through to people when you put things in that context. It's like, you don't have a lot of. Why do we need to spend that much money on regulating what Americans do in the land of the free? Why do we have more people in prison than any other country in the world?
Yeah, I was actually just going to mention that
Mm-hmm.
It kind of makes me laugh whenever people are like, America's the freest country in the world. It's like, you have the largest percentage of citizens who are incarcerated. That statistically makes you the least free country in the world.
Yeah, and then slave labor is still legal in prison, so that should tell you something. So it's all kind of related, and it's just, but these conversations don't ever make it out because everything is pretty well like the narratives. and it's just that what's acceptable to say, is scary to me. And people learn it so well they don't even recognize it's happening. It's like, well, that's just not something we talk about. It's like, why? Maybe there's a reason why you're not, trained yourself not to think about that. So,
Yeah.
mm.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're not ruffling feathers and you're not rubbing at least one person the wrong way, you're not saying enough.
That's true. That came up. That's one of the first things I said it was a class in college. I'm like, yeah, you're ready if you're not pissing somebody off. But then you also have to look at it like there's people that don't like chocolate, there's people that don't like bacon. So it's impossible to please everybody, right? I mean, if bacon doesn't please everybody,
well, not everybody can be right.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. Well, we could probably talk about social justice stuff for the next.
Yeah. Decade. All these topics have gone. I get kind of ranting and raving on some of them, so hopefully you can edit it down to some coherent meaning.
Well, to those watching, you can keep watching Walter ranting and raving by reading his Medium articles.
That would be great.
But for now, is there any final nuggets of wisdom you wanted to give to Medium writers at the moment?
No, I appreciate everybody on Medium. It's a really nice community. It's helped me kind of get off of other social media platforms. I appreciate the people we've met there. I found it's really, it's an educated group of people. People, every now and then you'll get spammed by bots, but for the most part, the Medium does a great job of making sure you're interacting with real human beings, and they leave thoughtful comments, and it's working with them for a couple years. It just allows you to, anytime you're in a more thoughtful community like that, it takes you just a while to relax and kind of get into it, so I think I would just encourage, I think every writer has to be on Medium. I think it's really important. And from the one aspect, it allows you to get your work seen like no other platform does. And it ties in like that, the idea of your articles that you aren't able to place, then you just place them on Medium and get something out of it. And you can promote your books. And there's all those writers who look for the little blue tags on the names, because those are the ones that are the verified book authors on Medium. Review those books and leave your comments, and you enjoy the community. But I think Medium's a place to be.
I couldn't agree more. Especially because I think writing is lonely a lot of the time, and Medium fixes that for people while giving you a platform. But it also gives you friends and connections.
I think that's a critical thing a lot of writers forget. They think that the only way to do it, and that gets me back to why I did my book review publication, the only way you're going to succeed is if you're promoting and building community and helping other writers. That's the only way that works. Agreed.
All right, Walter, thank you so much for joining us. You've had some phenomenal tips, really tangible stuff. I'm going to put a link to Walter's Substack in the description. I definitely recommend you follow it, because he really does have some great advice in there. And I'll put a link to your Medium, and people can read all of your ranting and ravings there. Great. All right. Thank you so much for joining me, Walter.
Yep. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you. And bye, everybody.